seen that women were the lesser or weaker sex of the two. They were not seen as strong or independent like men were. However, when men went to war, the women did the cooking, the cleaning, the care for the children, but they also did whatever the men did. They had a job, they had to provide for the family, and they often tended the farm. In the 19th century, women were finally beginning to break out and stand up for themselves and their rights. Several women in this time had huge impacts that last even today. They were often excluded from working, going to bars after long days, owning land, and voting and participating in the government, and so much more. By sending numerous letters, giving thousands of speeches, and hosting several rallies, these women made immense impacts on the movement towards equality. Women were often looked down upon in many ways. They were seen as uneducated, even though they weren't even given an education. And because of this lack of education, they weren't allowed to vote or participate in politics. So they literally had no say in their life. And then once a woman was married, the husband and wife became one, so the woman was often overshadowed by the husband. So they literally were invisible. The women were uneducated in that they had no math or literacy skills, and since there was no really need for a formal education, since all they did was cook and clean, they didn't get those skills. They might have been taught by their parents how to speak properly, and if the parents knew how, they were taught how to read. But other than that, like I said, they just cooked and cleaned and cared for the kids. And since they were mainly focused on taking care of the family, they were looked down upon if they wanted to get an education, because they seemed like they were being selfish. And because of this lack of education, men used this as a reason for not allowing women to participate in the government. But Judith Sargent Murray said it perfectly in her speech on the equality of sexes in 1790 that we can only reason from what we know, and if an opportunity of acquiring knowledge hath been denied us, the inferiority of our sex cannot fairly be deduced from thence. So in other words, how can you say that we're uneducated if you've never given us the opportunity to get an education? They claim that we aren't smart enough or mentally strong enough to participate in government or get an education, but how would they know if they've never given us the opportunity to prove them wrong? Murray then continues by saying, education hath set him so far above her, so that there's basically no even playing field between man and woman. The man can vote, the man can participate in government, and the man can get an education while the woman cannot. However, within time, the women finally began to get more education, and therefore they were able to participate in political discussion and take part in the abolitionist movement, which enabled them to get even closer to the government. In 1869, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton founded the National Women's Suffrage Association, and this works to protect all rights under the Constitution. Unfortunately, Congress ignored many of their pleas, but failure never seemed to stop them. Finally, in 1890, Wyoming entered as a suffrage state, and this was then followed by Utah, Idaho, and Colorado. Then Susan B. Anthony, a Quaker and a member of the Teachers Union, found that while women were making $2.50 and men were making $10 a week, and then she didn't really know what to do about this, but then once she met Stanton, they were able to make a team and make up marches and present speeches about it. Speaking up about women's rights was very difficult to do because there was a lot of refusal from many men, and a lot of the women in this time were very worried about the consequences that this might bring. Around the same time, however, many free blacks, slaves, and abolitionists were fighting for their rights. So to bring light to both, the activists called for a rally around the abolitionist movement, and this drew attention to human rights as a whole. Two sisters known as the Grimke sisters were best known for their abolitionist work. The Grimke sisters thought that in order for women to be heard, their platform had to be bigger. So this meant to include more people. They said that they called for women to participate in the freeing and educating of slaves. So by unifying the two fights, their two fights became one fight. The sisters wrote and spoke a lot, and one of the books that they wrote was called American Slavery as It Is, A Testimony for 1,000 Witnesses. And this then inspired Harriet Beecher Stowe to write Uncle Tom's Cabin, and many of us know that this helped end slavery and bring a lot of light to it and what was going on. Growing up, the sisters were exposed to a lot of government and politics. They were familiar with the constitutional law, as many of their family members were lawyers, and they believed that the natural right was a God-given right for everybody, no matter their race, ethnicity, or sex. Angelina points out in her work, The Appeal to Christian Women of the South, that the Lockean language of the Declaration of Independence, that men everywhere and of every color are born equal and have an inalienable right to liberty. Like the Grimke sisters, Stanton and Anthony joined in on the combination of abolitionists and the women's rights activists. In 1869, they founded the American Equal Rights Association, which shed light on both the African American rights and the women's rights. They became editors for a newspaper called The Revolution, and the motto of this newspaper was men their rights and nothing more, and women their rights and nothing less. So they weren't going to just settle for half of the rights, they wanted all of them, and they weren't going to settle for anything less. The paper created a form of protest for both men, women, and African Americans, and it allowed them to reach an even larger audience since it was paper and it went out to most people. Overall, these few people made huge impacts on the women's suffrage in the 19th century that has made a lasting impact on to this day, when women can vote, get a higher education, and be a part of government, and for the most part equal to man. The women of the 19th century were resilient and strong-willed, ready to fight individuals that have made an impact forever on life as we know it today.